Right. Good afternoon. I'm Minnesota Management and Budget Commissioner Erin Campbell. With me today are State Economist Dr. Anthony Becker and our State Budget Director Ahna Minge. Together we'll present the February 2026 Budget and Economic Forecast. I want to begin by acknowledging the work of Dr. Becker and his economic analysis team, as well as Ahna Minge and our state budget team and the other staff at MMB and our partner agencies who provide the information necessary to prepare our forecast. As a reminder, Minnesota is one of 13 states that show a 4-year window into our state's budget and economic outlook in our twice-yearly forecasts. That enables us to not only gauge near-term economic conditions, but also to plan for circumstances that may arise in the next biennium. We analyze a large amount of data to prepare our forecasts, and the forecasts represent the best financial projections that we can provide based on the information available when we prepare them. In this forecast, we'll continue to refine our projections for fiscal years 26 and 27, which will provide essential information that policymakers can use in any supplemental budget considerations. We also update our projections for the planning years FY28 and 29. After our presentation, we'll be happy to take your questions. There is good news in this forecast, but significant risks do remain. Minnesota is in a strong financial position. We now project to end fiscal years 26-27 with a surplus of $3.7 billion, which is $1.3 billion more than forecast in November. Left unspent, that surplus will carry forward into fiscal years 28 and 29. Those funds carrying forward are key to ending the planning years with a positive balance. As a result, we're currently forecasting a $377 million positive balance in FY28 and 29. The increased projected balance in both biennia is due to a slightly improved national economic outlook, which drives an increase in forecast revenues, particularly in individual income tax and corporate franchise taxes. When it comes to individual income taxes, we're seeing a shift from typical drivers of revenue increases, like wage and salary, to more volatile sources. Higher wages and more people in the workforce traditionally drive increases in revenue to individual income taxes. And wages do, in fact, continue to rise. However, employment growth is weak, both nationally and in Minnesota, and demographics and changing immigration policies are shrinking the pool of available workers. Instead, what we're seeing now is capital gains and interest earnings, which are sensitive to even small changes in the national economic outlook, propel much of the increase in the individual income tax revenues. As Minnesota becomes more reliant on these revenue sources, we're also seeing and should expect increased volatility. As we've discussed in previous forecasts, we also have seen unprecedented growth in our corporate tax revenues. And while this is generally good news, it's worth noting this has long been our most volatile revenue source. Dr. Becker will discuss this in more detail, but the lack of access to relevant federal data due to the federal government shutdown does have potential implications for our revenue forecast, particularly when it comes to our most volatile revenue sources. In Minnesota, we're also experiencing unprecedented threats to federal funding that we rely on. Any loss of federal funding is problematic, but particularly for entitlements, which would result in significantly increased costs to the state to provide legally required services without benefit of federal aid. The potential implications for the Minnesota budget should not be underestimated. And the structural imbalance, or the amount that spending exceeds revenues, continues to be an issue both in this biennium and the next, and that's even after the improvements to the revenue forecast. I do want to note that the significant actions taken by the governor and the legislature last spring in the enacted FY26-27 budget have helped drive a positive balance in FY28 and 29. And while the structural imbalance was not eliminated, it is improved in part due to those budget decisions. This slide shows a projected FY26-27 budgetary balance for this forecast in the middle column compared to the November estimates on the left. The column furthest to the right shows the difference between the two. At the top of the slide, you'll see that our beginning balance for the current biennium is nearly $10.3 billion. That money represents carry forward from the last biennium. Our revenue estimates for the current biennium are up about $1.2 billion from the November forecast, and spending projections are down $68 million. The projected balance at the end of fiscal years 26 and 27 appears under the lowest horizontal line. As you can see, we now forecast a positive balance of more than $3.7 billion, again, nearly $1.3 million than we had forecasted in November. This slide should look familiar. It shows the forecast horizon and the impacts of one biennium on the next. Before I get into the contents of this slide, it's important to remember that when we started this current biennium in July, we had the benefit of significant carry forward from FY 24 and 25 of $4.8 billion. This is important because we do have a structural imbalance in the biennium that we're currently in of $908 million. That starting balance, less the structural imbalance, leaves us with a projected balance of $3.7 billion. If we look at the screen, we'll start on the column in dark blue to the left. This is showing the $3.7 billion we project to be available at the end of FY 26-27. Left unspent, that money carries forward to become the beginning balance in fiscal years 28 and 29. If we move to the middle column in gold, you can see the projected structural imbalance in FY 28 and 29 of just under $3.4 billion. This is the amount the projected spending exceeds revenues generated in that biennium, plus discretionary inflation of over $1 billion. When you subtract that sum from the $3.7 billion, we're left with what you see in the dark blue column on the right, $377 million at the end of fiscal years 28 and 29. Discretionary inflation is included in the forecast to give policymakers a sense of what it would cost to maintain state services at the current level. If we don't count discretionary inflation, which as a reminder, legislators are not required to budget for, we'd have a projected positive balance of slightly more than $1.4 billion at the end of the planning years. With that, I'd like to invite State Economist Dr. Anthony Becker to the podium to cover our economic and revenue outlook.
Thank you, Commissioner Campbell. I'm Anthony Becker, Minnesota State Economist. Since Minnesota's budget and economic forecast was last prepared in November 2025, the U.S. economic outlook has improved slightly, with higher rates of growth in real gross domestic product, consumer expenditures, and investment, along with a forecast for slightly lower rates of inflation in the near term. However, payroll growth has weakened and trade policy uncertainty continues to cloud the economic outlook. Our macroeconomic consultant, S&P Global Market Intelligence, SPGMI, released their baseline forecast to us on February 6, 2026. Due to the federal government shutdown in October and November and the partial shutdown in early February, certain key data that are typically available for SPGMI's February forecast were not available to them. The data include fourth quarter gross domestic product and its components, corporate profits, and the January 2026 employment situation report. Also missing are consumer prices from October of 2025. On trade, SPGMI assumed an effective tariff rate of 14%, 4 percentage points lower than in November. The recent Supreme Court decision invalidating the IEEPA tariffs happened after SPGMI's forecast release, as did the 10% Section 122 tariffs that the administration announced. In this chart, we have SPGMI's forecast for GDP through the end of the forecast horizon. Here, the overall outlook has improved since November, with higher growth in 25 and slightly higher growth in 26, mostly due to an assumption that strong economic growth in quarters 3 and 4 of 25 would carry forward into 2026. As in November, GDP growth, though, remains below trend in 2027 and beyond. This means that employment demand is unlikely to be robust in the years ahead. Further, a low-growth economy can more easily slip into recession as a result of an adverse external shock. Real personal consumption expenditures, also known as real consumer spending, are the primary driver of growth in the economy, accounting for roughly 70% of GDP. SPGMI now forecasts real consumer spending will grow 2.8% in 2026, 0.7 of a percentage point higher than their November forecast. From 2027 through 2029, real consumer spending is expected to grow 2.2% per year on average. Despite rising incomes, we are observing some signs of consumer stress with higher delinquency rates in certain loans, credit cards, auto loans, and student loans, with delinquency rates now reaching levels comparable to those during the Great Recession. However, home loan delinquency rates remain at historic lows. Compared to the November forecast, inflation is projected to be slightly lower in 2026 and higher from 2027 to 29. Lower near-term inflation reflects a lower assumed average effective tariff rate than in the November forecast, and lower inflation that we experienced in late 2025. Overall, inflation in both the CPI and core personal consumption expenditure indices is expected to remain elevated through 2027 before gradually easing in 2028. Corporate profits are now forecast to grow 9.5% in fiscal year 2026, 7.4 percentage points stronger than projected in November. In FY27 and beyond, corporate profits are forecast to show minimal growth. Minnesota's corporate franchise tax is closely related to the level of corporate profits and is the state's most volatile revenue source. The volatility in this revenue source makes it difficult to forecast with precision. Minnesota's unemployment rate has continued to increase over the past year, both absolutely and relative to the national rate. In December, Minnesota's unemployment rate was 4.1%, up 1.1 percentage points from a rate of 3.0% 1 year ago. Although the unemployment rate has risen, Minnesota's rate remains below the national rate, and the state's job market remains favorable to job seekers, with more vacancies than unemployed workers. While this forecast does not include a recession, we are following labor market conditions closely, as some labor market indicators send early signals of economic contractions and expansions. Traditionally, a significant driver of our individual income tax forecast is the forecast for total wage and salary disbursements, and it is little changed since the November forecast. In this forecast, though, wage income is not what is driving the change in the individual income tax forecast. Rather, the increase is driven by increases in non-wage income, principally in capital gains distributions. SPGMI's forecast of the S&P 500 stock index is one determinant of our forecast for non-wage income. Their February forecast is substantially higher than their November forecast for the S&P 500. In November, they projected a 12% multi-year downward correction in the S&P 500, with the market declining through late 2028. But in the current forecast, they assume a milder correction of only 4% and recovery beginning in 2027. Equity markets present both upside and downside risks to the forecast. If equity markets continue their current upward trends, we will see greater levels of consumer spending and higher non-wage income, both of which will increase state revenues. On the other hand, if we see a substantial decrease in market values of equities, both income and spending would likely fall. So turning to the revenue forecast, the first two columns of the table show the February forecast for the current biennium and the change compared to the November forecast. The second set of columns show the same information for the next biennium. Total revenues for the current biennium are now forecast to be $68 billion, 1.8% more than in the November forecast. We're now projecting individual income tax receipts to be 1.9% more than we projected in November. This increase is primarily due to higher forecasts for individual income tax liability in tax years 25 and 26. The higher tax liability forecast is largely driven by higher forecasts for non-wage income sources, such as capital gains realization, interest income, and IRA distributions. Through January 26, individual estimated tax payments for tax year 25 are $165 million above our November forecast, which is consistent with a higher tax year 2025 liability. Technical adjustments and a higher forecast for net partnership and S-corporation collections further contribute to the forecast change. And this is also consistent with stronger collections we've observed through January of this year. General sales tax revenue is now forecast to be nearly $16 billion, 0.5% more than in the current biennium than in the November forecast. This increased forecast reflects a higher forecast for consumer spending on goods and services subject to the sales tax. The corporate franchise tax is forecast to generate $6.6 billion in the current biennium, 5.4% more revenue than in the November forecast. This forecast change is due to the higher corporate profits forecast as shown previously. Other revenues are now forecast to generate almost $10 billion, 1.2% more than in November, due primarily to an increased forecast for investment income, the return the state earns on its cash balances, including the budget reserve. As I noted previously, higher forecasts for non-wage income sources are primary drivers of the higher individual income tax forecast. The non-wage share of gross income reported by Minnesota taxpayers has been increasing over time, and we expect this trend to continue. Non-wage income, such as capital gains and interest income, are more variable from year to year than wage and salary income. With a rising proportion of personal income tax coming from more volatile sources, the overall volatility of income tax collections has increased. Further, over time, the proportion of general fund revenues coming from more volatile corporate tax, franchise tax, has also risen. This adds volatility to the state's revenue collections in total. To turn to forecast risks. First among the risks to this forecast are the policy uncertainties at the federal level, especially regarding trade, tariffs, and immigration. Trade uncertainty may induce businesses and consumers to take on less debt, suppressing both private investment and some forms of consumer spending. Tariffs are mostly passed through to domestic buyers and so also contribute to higher prices and higher input costs for businesses. The administration's immigration policies also produce forecast risk through the potential to create labor shortages in business sectors dependent on immigration for new workers. The recent federal shutdown disrupted the usual collection and dissemination of federal statistical data. The missing data due to the shutdown clouds our picture of economic growth, corporate profits, inflation, and labor market conditions, adding uncertainty to our revenue forecast. It also makes it more difficult to assess the reasonableness of SPGMI's forecasts of inflation and exchange rates. Equity markets present both upside and downside risks, as I've already mentioned. The assumed path of monetary policy depends on both inflation and labor market conditions. Because of the trade uncertainty and weak national employment growth, there's limited clarity about monetary policy through the forecast horizon. The adoption of artificial intelligence provides both upside and downside risks. The upside or positive risk is that through more capital investment, we'll see increased labor productivity, higher wages, and possibly higher employment. The downside risks include the possibility of job losses from AI adoption and the risk that there is an AI investment bubble which may burst. Finally, there are 17 months remaining until the end of the current biennium, and it's difficult to forecast macroeconomic conditions with great precision a year and a half ahead. That ends my portion of the presentation, so I will now turn things over to our State Budget Director, Ahna Minge.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ahna Minge, State Budget Director at Minnesota Management and Budget. Today, I will be walking through changes in the state expenditure forecast, and then I'll turn it to the Commissioner who will walk through our long-term budget outlook. So this slide outlines anticipated changes in general fund spending in the current biennium as well as our planning years of 2028 and 2029. In total, we project that spending in the current biennium will be $68 million lower than our previous estimates, but the planning estimates have increased by $152 million since our last forecast. Let me walk you through the table to give a better sense of what's driving that change. The first line, E12 education, spending is above prior estimates by $111 million this biennium and $257 million in the next. These increases are a result of higher spending for special education, where costs have grown as school districts spend more to deliver services to our students. Health and Human Services spending is projected to be $162 million below previous estimates this biennium and $199 million lower in the next. This reduction is largely driven by the implementation of new payment review processes in the Medical Assistance Program, which I will discuss in greater detail in a moment. On the next line, you can see the property tax aids and credits spending is $18 million below previous estimates in this biennium, largely as a result of lower spending on property tax refunds. Spending for debt service and all other areas of the budget are virtually unchanged from previous estimates. On the next line, you can see that our forecast includes an estimate of discretionary inflation. We estimate this cost to be $1.04 billion, which is $104 million more than we forecast in November. This change is due to a slightly higher forecast for the Consumer Price Index, which can have a large budgetary impact because it's applied on such a large base of spending. As a reminder, this number is not meant to be a specific accounting every single inflationary pressure in the budget. Rather, it is a guide for policymakers about the cost of maintaining current services as prices grow. Any increases need to be appropriated by the legislature. They don't automatically flow to state programs unless the program has a specific statutory formula that directs it. So policymakers have the choice whether or not to spend this line item to address those inflationary pressures. So now let's move on to the next slide to discuss some key changes within our spending forecast. As you just heard, special ed is responsible for the upward revision in our education forecast. These costs have increased by $112 million this biennium and $350 million in the next relative to where we were in November. That is on top of the significant increases that we incorporated in the November forecast of $133 million in 26-27 and $287 million in 2028 and 2029. Today's increases are because we now have complete data about what schools spent on special ed services in the 2024-25 school year. Special ed service spending grew by about 10% last year compared to the 6% that we assumed would grow in the previous forecast. The annual rate of growth for school special ed spending has grown significant in recent years, driving revisions in the state forecast. So the chart on this slide shows actual and forecast state general fund special ed spending from 2020 through 2029. During this time period, we project that special ed spending is projected to grow from $1.6 billion in 2020 to $3.6 billion in 2029. When you look at that on an annual growth perspective, from 2020 through 2023, state general fund spending on special ed grew about 5% on average annually, but from 25 through 29, that rate grows to about 9.5% a year. Some of the changes can be attributed to legislative changes that affect special ed, but overall growth in local education agency spending continues to rise forecast over forecast. And that's really evident on this slide when you look at the previous forecast that we have marked in those dotted and dashed lines. You can see from the end of the 2023 legislative session is the bottom line, then the end of the 2025 legislative session, and finally November 2025 session. So in each of these cases, we've revised our forecast upward to account for higher actual spending sort of at the local level. Now let's move on and talk about a driver of the change in the human services forecast. So this forecast is the first to incorporate the experience that we have with the new prepayment review process for certain medical assistance benefits. In late October 2025, the Minnesota Department of Human Services announced a new process to suspend and review claims for 14 high-risk Medicaid benefits. This was intended to give the agency additional time to identify suspicious patterns and anomalies. DHS contracted with a third party for this review and has established an ongoing prepayment review process for these services. This process has impacted the forecast in 3 ways, which are sort of just depicted in the chart on the screen. So what the chart shows is the forecast savings attributable to the prepayment review process. The most immediate impact, in the dark blue on the slide, is the delay in the payment of fee-for-service claims of 2 weeks. This additional review takes time, and as a result, the claims are paid just 1 billing cycle later than they would have otherwise. And because everything is pushed out by 2 weeks, there is just a one-time savings reflected in the forecast. But the most significant impact of the prepayment review process comes from the fact that we are receiving fewer bills from providers. Some have referred to this as cost avoidance. Through an analysis of claims from both before and during the implementation of prepayment review, DHS estimates about 4% lower spending in these 14 services as a result of providers simply billing less. This cost avoidance is expected to decrease state spending by $75 million this biennium and $99 million in the next. This estimate is based on actual experience in the most recent quarter, and it's not an explicit measure of fraud. It may indicate that there's a deterrent effect of the new prepayment review process, but it might also be capturing savings related to broader conditions in both the service delivery sector or the broader economy. The third forecast impact of the prepayment review process is the denial of claims that would have been otherwise paid if not for the review. In this process, claims for the impacted benefits are reviewed using targeted analytics and then flagged if suspicious. So if a claim is identified for further review, it's sent to DHS staff who reviews it and decides either to approve or deny. Based on early data, DHS projects an increase in denials, which reduces state spending by $5 to $6 million a biennium. So in total, the incorporation of this experience lowers the spending forecast by $133 million this biennium and $105 million in the next. So now let's move on and talk about something that is not in the forecast. So as we've discussed in previous forecasts, federal funds are a very important piece of the state budget. Federal funds make up about 1 in every $3 spent by state agencies. What M&B pays particular attention to, though, are federal funds that support state-level entitlements, programs where the state has an obligation under our laws to provide service to individuals regardless of federal funding levels. We estimate these dollars make up about 2/3 of the funds we receive from the federal government. In these cases, losses of federal funds create a direct budgetary impact to the state. Federal funding for entitlement programs has been more volatile in recent months as a result of both federal law changes and administrative action, and there are several risks that are not reflected in today's forecast. One example is related to actions taken by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, also referred to as CMS, which is the federal agency overseeing Medicaid. On January 6th, CMS indicated their intent to withhold $515 million per quarter from the state's MA reimbursement. That action is currently pending appeal, and the loss of federal funds is not reflected in our estimates today. And now just earlier this week, we received additional notice from CMS that they would defer $260 million of our Medicaid reimbursements pending further information from the state to justify claims that they flagged. There is also budgetary risk from the fact that some of our state laws do not comply with federal law that passed over the summer. Specifically, H.R. 1, the Federal Reconciliation Bill, made a number of changes, some of which must be implemented by January 1st of 2027. An example of that would be work reporting requirements for Medicaid. If state law is not amended to comply with this change, we stand to lose significant federal funds supporting this program. Unfortunately, we don't have the guidance today to quantify the magnitude of this risk, but we understand that it could be significant and could change our budget outlook. There have also been recent attempts by the federal government to freeze funds supporting child care benefits and MFIP. And although none of these impacts are currently reflected, if they occur, it could dramatically alter our current budget outlook. With that, I'll turn it back to Commissioner Campbell.
All right, thank you, Ahna. This slide shows the long-term budget outlook. It compares our forecast revenues against our estimated spending for the current biennium and the next. And that's without including any unspent projected balances or transfers to the reserve. This is what we call our structural balance. As you can see, forecast revenues of $67.5 billion in the current biennium are expected to grow by $2.5 billion in the next, an annualized growth rate of 1.9%. During that same period, we are expecting baseline spending of $68.4 billion to increase by nearly $4 billion, or 2.9% on an annualized basis in the FY 28-29 biennium. If you include appropriation carryforward and discretionary inflation, total spending is projected to exceed $70.2 billion in this biennium, growing by $3.1 billion to a total of $73.4 billion in the planning years, an annualized growth rate of 2.2%. So if we take a step back, when we subtract total forecasted spending in the planning biennium from expected revenues in that same period, you end up with a structural imbalance of nearly $3.4 billion, or $2.3 billion if you don't include discretionary inflation. Despite tremendous progress in the last legislative session, more work is needed to address the ongoing structural imbalance to align revenues and spending. You can see on this slide how our budget reserves have grown over the years, thanks to our nation-leading reserve policy. With the addition of $244 million last November, our total cash flow and budget reserve remains at a record high of $3.8 billion. Those reserve dollars not only protect us against an unexpected loss of revenues in the current biennium, they also help us maintain our AAA bond ratings and our reputation as a financially well-managed state. As I close, I want to reinforce that the state of Minnesota is on strong financial footing. We have a very healthy projected balance in FY 26-27 of nearly $3.7 billion on the bottom line. And despite persistent structural imbalances, we expect to end this biennium and the next with a positive balance. And that's a big improvement from November, particularly in FY 28 and 29. Additionally, we have our nation-leading automatic allocation to our reserve, which means that we have the funds to address an unexpected revenue shortfall. And just a note here that in light of Minnesota's increased dependence on more volatile revenue sources, there may be adjustments needed to the budget reserve target level to better capture those heightened risks in the future. We also have our AAA bond rating that demonstrates rating agencies' continued confidence in Minnesota's responsible financial management and our history of taking actions to keep the state on sound financial footing. And we also have time to address the structural changes needed to bring spending and revenue in line in order to avoid a future fiscal crisis. Still, it will be important for policymakers to keep a few things in mind as they make decisions this legislative session. First, the volatility of the revenue that's driving the forecast improvement. In particular, in light of the relevant macroeconomic data that did not arrive in time to be included in this forecast. Even the most recently released GDP and corporate profits data could have meaningful impacts on available revenues. As we've mentioned, continued federal funding uncertainty could have impacts on our general fund bottom line. And as we know, any new spending this biennium will impact the projected positive balance of $377 million in FY 28 and 29. And finally, structural imbalance does continue to be an issue. Alignment of spending and revenue will need to be addressed. The sooner we begin looking for additional ways to do that, the less likely we are to face a future fiscal cliff. Given these considerations, it's our recommendation that policymakers should, at a minimum, strongly consider offsetting any new spending with spending reductions to be mindful of both the FY 28-29 projected balance and the structural imbalance. I do want to once again acknowledge the important work done last legislative session that did have a material impact on this forecast. That fiscal discipline will remain important in this legislative session and the next. As always, MMB will continue to watch for significant changes through our monthly revenue updates, our quarterly economic updates, our close monitoring of federal actions, and we'll be providing that information to the legislature and to the public so that they can anticipate and respond to economic changes. And with that, we are happy to take your questions.
Commissioner, can you talk more about the immigration action? We heard about possible labor shortages, but what about workers staying home, businesses permanently closing, temporarily closing? What kind of impact could that be having on the forecast?
At this point, we don't have the data that would be necessary it's not ultimately included in this forecast. The data is not available on that at this time.
Certainty or fears do you have about not having that data?
I think that it's fair to say that we are concerned about the potential impacts of all of that. We don't know how it's going to impact how that data will ultimately drive revenues and the data that we ultimately use to identify what revenues will be available in this forecast. And so it's a little bit too soon to say, but it certainly doesn't seem like it's going to be favorable.
Can you talk more broadly about some of the variables that aren't necessarily included in here and how that might impact what ends up happening?
In terms of the federal funding and yeah. Well, take, for example, the $260 million that the federal government highlighted just 2 days ago. If that came to pass, that money would need to come off of the bottom line, and it would reduce the available balance in FY 28 and 29 by 2/3. And so that's just one example of the variables that we can't include in this forecast at this time, and the real impact that it could have on the forecast. And the reality is that it wouldn't take much to have $377 million in a positive balance end up being a negative number in the next few months.
Why doesn't MMB include these variables in the forecast? I mean, we're talking about almost $3 billion a year potentially in Medicaid and child care money missing. Why does this forecast not even put that in the pessimistic scenario as something that might happen?
So what we put in the forecast is based on current law. These things have not yet come to pass. When they do, we include them. Because they've not come to pass, we identify them as risks and talk about them in that way.
What do you make of the, I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Becker, what do you make of the signs of the consumer stress that home loan delinquency rates remain at lows, but you're starting to see it in credit cards, auto loans, and student loans? Is that going to spill over into the home loans, or how do you explain that?
So, yes, we have seen rising delinquency rates in credit cards, in auto loans, and in student loans. Student loans, pretty easy to explain. A lot of COVID-era relief measures have terminated. And the delinquency rates have risen essentially to where they were pre-pandemic. And then also, they had been fairly steady at a high level out of the Great Recession. Credit cards and auto loans, it's going to take some more analysis to really figure out why delinquency rates there are higher. And that analysis would involve looking at the characteristics of the households that are entering delinquency. But it is likely because of this term that's been popular lately, the K-shaped economy, where people at the top end of the income distribution are doing well and people in the middle and lower half of the income distribution are not doing so well. So these delinquencies in all likelihood, as they usually are concentrated in the lower ends. And so more than likely what's going on is that we have, this K-shaped thing going on, and that part of the income distribution, people are not, they're feeling the affordability crisis and so forth. And so that would be my best take on this for right now.
Because you mentioned the immigration labor shortages, and that was the prior data. I'm guessing that's only going to get worse once new data comes in. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I was referring to the general policies of both restricting immigration enforcement, restrictions on H-1B visas and so forth, that it is likely that those restrictions on immigration will have an adverse effect on the national economy, but Minnesota in particular, much of our labor force growth over the last several years has been because of international immigration. Now, in the last year, we actually did see a gain from net national migration, which is great for our labor force, but that was the first time that it happened since 2018. But on the international front, yes, I think there will probably be reduced labor supply in a number of areas.
I love your tie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could you put Minnesota just, excuse me, in context with its neighboring states, some of our peers? How are we doing?
I would say that fiscally we are in very good shape. We have the AAA bond rating. We have a legislature and a governor who work together to reduce the structural deficit, which puts us with increased revenues in, I think, a very favorable position going into the next biennium. It's hard to compare us with a state like North Dakota, which is highly dependent on natural resources. But I would say that Minnesota's economy tends to be more resilient because it is more balanced and more reflective of the national economy, that we're not fully dependent on, let's say, agriculture. Like Iowa is more highly dependent on agriculture, not fully dependent, but North Dakota is highly dependent on extractive industries and so forth. So I think we're able to weather storms better, and that we also are poised for growth sooner.
I have a question for Ahna Minge about the prepayment review impact. Can you explain what accounts for a larger savings on the cost avoidance side, and is the timing delay that's built into this biennium just related to, like, we have that because you talked about the 2-week delay, that we just have more of that information? Like, could we expect that next biennium number to grow?
So in terms of the prepayment review process, the immediate, or one immediate impact is that there's sort of a permanent delay as it takes time for, the third party and DHS to review claims. So claims can't get paid quite as quickly. And we just assume it's sort of like we take one billing cycle and move it into the next year. And then that year we take that last billing cycle and we push it out. So this is we assume it's just a one-time savings as everything just gets pushed out a year, or pushed out 2 weeks, and every year just has a 2-week shift in and 2 weeks shift out. So the question about the cost avoidance, through an analysis of claims for the 14 services before and during the implementation of the prepayment review process, it appears that we are receiving about 4% fewer bills, or less in billing dollars, than we did prepayment review process. And that's just assumed to be sort of continuous through the forecast horizon. That is, we can't speak exactly to why that's happening, just what we're seeing in the data. It might be driven by a deterrent effect, knowing that this review is happening, but also there are other things going on in the world at any given point in time.
What do you make of that spike in special ed?
So we've been talking about special ed a lot, probably every forecast. We have seen what is happening is that districts, charters, co-ops, so local education partners, they, based on the cost that they experience, that then drives what the state, largely we reimburse them for the majority of their costs. And so in 24-25, back in the November forecast, we had partial data that suggested costs were growing about 6%. And then when we got the rest of districts reporting, it turned out that costs actually grew 10%. There are a few things that are contributing to that change. So most of it is that most special ed spending is on payroll and fringe costs for personnel, and that is growing over time. I think that the cost of labor is growing, and sometimes there's a lagged effect from some of the inflation that we've experienced in recent years. There's also a major driver is special ed transportation costs, which is something that we talked about last year a fair amount as well. And then there's another program called ADSIS, which stands for the Alternative Delivery of Specialized Instruction Services, which is also mostly staffing costs. It's designed to provide interventions to assist students to avoid them needing more intensive services. And applications for that program is up significantly as well.
So, follow-up question. The 4% decrease, is that from 2025 Q4, or is that from the first 2 months of the prepayment review process in 2026? 5%.
So the question is about what's the pre and post comparison for prepayment review. Let me just confirm and get back to you.
Thank you. One more here. The report says that the forecast does not include any impact from CMS's communicated intent to withhold $515 million per quarter in federal matching funds in response to concerns over fraud. Depending on how the state's appeal goes, what could the forecast impact be there?
So I think in general, if we lose, we don't know when the withholding would start. We don't know how many quarters would be withheld. So it's hard to say for certain, but a loss of $515 million in federal funding would mean an increase in state spending of $515 million. So on an annualized basis, that's about $2 billion. If you subtract, it'd be a $2 billion lower surplus this biennium, and then a $2 billion lower balance out in the tails because that money carries forward. So our projected balance in 28-29 would flip to a projected shortfall.
Because the state is obligated to spend that money in Medicaid.
All right.
Well, good afternoon, and the picture fits. It does feel like spring. First of all, a thank you to Commissioner Campbell and all the staff over at MMB for the continued work, to Budget Director Minge and your team, and to Dr. Becker. Thank you for taking on this work and providing us good data. Look, it's good news day. Minnesota's economy continues to be one of the most resilient and diverse in the country. We've had disciplined budgeting help protect Minnesotans from a lot. Over the last 7 years, I guess, between global pandemics, global economic turndowns, tariffs, Operation Metro Surge, and the Trump administration's continued retribution against Minnesota, we've weathered those things. Our goal is to keep Minnesota on solid financial footing, ready to handle whatever comes. We've worked to do the things that were necessary, and it's not easy. And I said I'm going to be putting out a very, I think, measured supplemental budget in the next month. But I will continue to say this. We have made the pledge that we wanted to make Minnesota the best place in the country for a family to live. We wanted to make it a place where people are able to achieve their dreams. We don't have a budget year this year, but we have important work to do. Yesterday, we rolled out again, as we have for several years now, a more comprehensive package around our continued fight, which we're seeing great returns in, of protecting these incredible programs that we're getting incredible results from. Tuesday, we introduced a proposal to keep Minnesotans safe with a gun violence prevention package. We'll do more of that, but my budget will come out next month. But what I'd like to say is, budgets are not just fiscal documents, they're moral documents. They reflect what you care about. And we made a case to make this the best state in the nation. And in the 2023 session, we had policies like child tax credit. We made major investments in education, paid family and medical leave program that's now entering its third month, and public safety infrastructure, as well as incentives to business growth. Those things, for the first time in almost a decade, we've seen immigration, and Minnesota is one of the few states in the upper Midwest that saw a population increase from immigration, not including outside immigration, that is inside the country. And then I'll go ahead and say what I've been saying all along since last June. Some of the finest work, legislative work and policy work and budget work that I've been associated with was what we were able to accomplish in the last legislative session. That was a split, a dead-on split legislature, Democrats, Republicans working together to make sure that we were continuing to provide what was necessary to make Minnesota an incredibly generous and caring state, but at the same time do so in a fiscally responsible manner, not just in our immediate responsibility, but doing the work that very few states do over the horizon, including inflation. And I have to think that in a different political world 30, 40 years ago, we would all be standing up here together. A huge thank you to the legislative leaders, Democrats and Republicans, who did that hard work last year. And we're in this position we're in right now because that was done. Now, there is more to be done. We know that we started to rebalance some of the things we needed to rebalance, but some of you have already pointed out, and we have noted this. Very important programs, things that are our responsibility to take care of, like special education. We still have to figure out how to make sure that those costs are contained in a way that we're delivering the services, but yet they're not outstripping what the budget can take. And again, weathering things that come in an economy, whether it's a storm damage, whether it was a global pandemic. I think the thing that, for me, that is very frustrating is when there's things that were totally avoidable that are hurting our economy, like tariffs, and of course, like Metro Surge, and then this totally unconstitutional and a violation of states' rights for absolutely no reason, this threat to withhold money. And, you know, just when you've got the director of CMS telling you, well, the state can just use their rainy day funds, well, you're wrong. If you're going to say those things, you're going to be the budget. At least understand how the states work. Not only is it horrific to try and say that because it's our money, it's horrific because a generalization that there's fraud in that program when their own data shows that the error rate in Minnesota is 2.1%. The national average is over 6%. We're actually one of the more secure states. We've had people steal from us. We put them in jail. We continue to tighten those up. But this budget forecast and the work that we've done, whether it being AAA bond rating or being able to show continued surpluses while at the same time giving tax cuts to the middle class, this is smart policy. And I go back to this again. This policy, if left in place as we're doing it, we're going to see numbers reducing childhood poverty rates. Again, we're going to see an influx of people moving here. We're going to see an increase, which we've seen, of job creation and job survivability, all at the same time people experience in their own life really important programs like paid family and medical leave, access to college education, free school meals, all of the things that we care about. So really grateful for all the work. I hope it sets the tone. Because I don't think there's a lot of states were able to do what we were able to do collectively, bipartisanly, last legislative session. If we carry that same spirit over, while not as extensive in a budget year, we can get some good things done. So with that, I take some questions. Yeah.
Does this mean there's not a lot of new spending that you'll pursue this year?
Well, I think it'll be measured. The question was, with a lot of new spending. I think we have to be very careful. That's where I was last year. And I think many of you know the actual budget I put out actually called for more cuts than we ended up agreeing to, but that's part of this process. I'm going to, just like this team has, and I think it's wise, there's a lot of unknown variables here. I just have to be candid with you. I don't necessarily see this administration stopping this attack on Minnesota that they've done. I do see the court siding with us and us winning, but those uncertainties can be enough. So I'm going to call for this. We've got work to do. As I said, we've got important policy thing. I am going to make my pitch that I think collectively, all of us together, a top priority is to get the bonding bill done, make sure we're able to do that. That's always very bipartisan. It has to be. So I think that's going to be our priority. But I think you'll see limited expenditures. I'll get that out next month. And I will credit again bipartisanly Republican House leadership with Paul Torkelson was, I think, pushing very hard for upgrades to our legacy systems that are now proving to be one of the big sticking points, both in accuracy of delivering of services and, quite honestly, of slowing down the work that needs to be done in the counties. And I'm going to make the case, I don't think we'll probably get that thing all tackled this year, but I think set us on a path. That was some good leadership. It was bipartisan. Zach Stevenson and Paul Torkelson worked really hard on that. I think that's something I hope we see again.
There was evidence of claims denied or delayed. There were some numbers. Did you ask how much fraud was in the forecast or the budget? Do you have that number now?
Well, I think it's hard to tell that these folks would tell you the correlation between that. I do think you're seeing savings. And I want to be careful on this because I know that, you know, a denial of claims and a slowing down of those claims, we're always trying to balance out a state that these systems were set up to deliver services. They weren't set up to deny services. And we've talked about this a lot of making sure we're in balance between the two. I think it's clear from the fraud that did happen that we needed to do more. And I think what you're seeing is hopefully striking that proper balance. Because I am deeply concerned too that, you know, there are those that their answer to stopping fraud is to cut the program. Well, the reason we have such a great state and we're having people move in and we're seeing surpluses is because we have these programs. But I think it's too early to tell, but I do think getting that data and staying on it, I know Ahna talked a little bit about it. We think there's evidence to show that it's happening.
People move in. Are you concerned about labor shortages? That was mentioned
Yes.
as a concern.
Well, I think Dr. Becker has talked about that, and I think all of us is. And the immigration piece is one we have to solve. And again, the overly simplistic and quite honestly disingenuous argument that, you know, if you don't want to see this massive, ridiculous, aggressive, unconstitutional attack we saw, well, you just don't care if there's bad people on the streets. No, I want you to go after the bad people. I want you to go after the people who shouldn't be here and are the worst of the worst. But what I want you to do is what should have been done, you know, 2 decades ago. We need comprehensive immigration reform across America because we have a shrinking population and we're going to need that growth. So,
Structural imbalance here, a pretty significant one. Do you think that spending is on the right trajectory here? Does it need to be taken down?
well, I'll let the team talk here. Actually, if we didn't spend anything, I do believe now that that is a $377 million bottom line if we carry over. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a positive balance on the bottom line projected at this point in 28 and 29. We do have the structural imbalance that needs to be addressed at some point.
So what I would say is that I think we moved massively, and this number changed dramatically, and it economics, so it's pointing to everything, but we knew this was coming. We knew we were out of balance. We knew we could still deliver services to the highest level of any state in the country and still show savings. We made a good move on that. I am convinced if we stay on this track, if we give our counties or figure out a better way that we're delivering these services, if we give a modernized, get away from that old legacy system of how we do these benefits and put in the things in the program that we're putting forward on prepayment verification and all of that, I think what you're going to see is you saw spending going down. I think you can continue to do that and still get the level of services. But I would caution again, we tackled a big chunk of that. We did not tackle it all, which was good because we started early enough. I think we take another bite out of it this time. And when in 2027, when the budget year comes up, I think we're much, much better prepared to handle it.
Governor, when you talk about legacy systems, do you mean like the IT infrastructure?
Yeah.
And there's been some discussion, I mean, it seems like Republicans and Democrats both think that that should be a priority, but that it would be quite costly to do. So are you concerned about the cost of that if you do still have this imbalance of spending and revenues?
Yes, the question is really good. It's about the IT infrastructure, especially for social services delivery. I went down to Dakota County with county commissioners down there and they put me through said, here's an application, you do it, Governor, how to put it through. It's as antiquated as you can possibly imagine, and it's prone with the ability to make errors. Our people and the county people do an incredible job with it. But these legacy systems, this thing dates back. Nobody wants to do this. It's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly hard. And we've just kept patching that thing down the line. It's going to have to be fixed. So I'm willing to work with the legislature. I think we need to take a bite out of it. What I think we need is a multi-year plan on budgeting to tackle that, working hard. And then I think we're learning a lot. Reorganizing. We made progress. I think some of us forgot about this. This is not new that DHS was too big, too unwieldy. So we broke it apart to try and get a better view into that. There is more work to be done, so I think a reorganization around DHS, I think those are bipartisan things that we agree with, continue to do so.
One of the areas
You this week put out a comprehensive gun plan and also a comprehensive fraud fighting plan. Do you have any ballpark estimate at this point how much both of those comprehensive packages will cost in this plan?
I don't actually on that one, and I can get it to you. I think they're relatively close to budget neutral, and we'll get back to them. So I don't think there's a lot of spending in those packages. Hopefully we should see savings in both of those. The fraud obviously is one.
One of the areas of significant spending growth in the forecast is special education. Is there anything that you can do to rein in that spending, or anything that you'll be announcing in the coming weeks?
I think so, and I want to be very careful, and this is to the legislators who are really thoughtful about this. I think in terms that we're using of talking about reining in spending or all of this, just to be clear, these are fundamental services that we have both a moral and a legal obligation to provide. And when we're talking about curbing the cost, we're talking about being more efficient. We're talking about better ways of doing it without saying this group of folks is a burden on our budget and we need to cut them down. That's the wrong way to approach it. I do think there are things that we could do there. I don't think, and I said it last year, I don't think we're getting all of the efficiencies. And we talked about this. I would just want to say, just for an example of helping counties out, and this is kind of, I wouldn't call it unintended consequences, but it's like squeezing the balloon and it comes out somewhere else. We reduced the cross subsidies of making sure we were getting money to them, getting to the city, to each of the school districts. But by us picking up the cross subsidy, perhaps there are programs being delivered that would have been thought differently if that wasn't there. And I just say that this is a fundamental Democratic and Republican idea that we should try and be as efficient as we possibly can. And I think in some of these areas, there are savings that can be found without having any negative impact on the folks we care about and seeing a savings. But I am concerned about it. I made this analogy last year that from one biennium to the next, just the increase in special ed transportation funding, just that piece of the special ed, was actually bigger than the entire DNR budget. So people say you need to cut government to save that. We could cut all of the DNR, every single thing they do, every person over there, every job, every state park, everything. And in 2 years, the savings we would have saw would have been eaten up by the transportation cost in special ed. We're going to have to figure that out. Yes.
Governor, this week where we've seen lots of federal dollars be paused, what weighs on you going forward when you are coming up with your recommendation for the legislature? What message should they have to when deciding how to spend that money? Is there a big concern of what could come we don't know?
Yeah, be fiscally conservative. Focus on the things that make a difference. Focus on the things that are growing our economy, that are creating the surplus, that are improving people's lives. But be very thoughtful. Look, this is I'll be generous. This is an unpredictable federal government. What I really need is, and I don't know if I heard it yesterday, it shouldn't be that difficult for every legislator to say, this is the wrong way to approach this. You don't just throw this out there. You don't have the director of CMS said the state can pick it up, which is not true. It doesn't work, not to mention we're a donor state. And I need Republican legislators to ask the federal government to not do these type of things. And I expect those same Republican legislators here to ask us to find savings. And I want to work with them on that. But I think my guidance will be, and it's the way we're going to approach it from our office, this is good news. Minnesota's policies are working. They're making a difference, but it's not as solid as it can be. And I think over the horizon, because it's my goal, I'm going to leave the state in good shape. I'm going to leave the state, again, with historic budget reserves, with budget surpluses, and programs that are functioning like paid family medical leave the way they should, that are actually growth to the economy. So I think we need to be cautious. The legislature is independent branch. They will come up with the things that they want to get done. But I have to tell you, it was spectacular work last year to be able to get there. Very hard. People took votes they didn't want to.
Does your proposal that you're going to release next month, does it include any revenue raising measures?
Do we this time? Well, we're not out yet, so we're still talking about it. I think the goal is where it's and those small things, whether they're tab fees or types of things that we're doing, we haven't worked through it all yet. But I think what you can expect is it'll be relatively the budget will be relatively modest across the board, both in terms of new spending or if there are potential revenue streams.
What about tax conformity?
We have to tackle it. We'll see. We're not an automatic tax conformity state, and the big, beautiful bill has lots of things in there that we have to figure out what conformity is going to look like. I think a lot of states are grappling with that right now, but that's a piece of this too during this session.
Governor, any timeline on that CMS appeal for the state?
You know, and I would if the folks were here to hear this, I would just my experience of working in Congress, and when you're dealing with CMS on an appeal, 12 to 18 months is not unusual. And am I speaking out of turn there?
I don't think we know what the timeline is, but we're not anticipating.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Again, to my friends in the Republican caucuses, ask them that this is not really wise. And I would ask you again, and there wasn't a single thing. What is the specific fraud in Medicaid that you believe taking away health care from 400,000 children, pregnant women, and seniors makes this move a good move to fix this, rather than the data-driven moves we're making that are showing we're tackling it? And there are other ways to deal with this. I come to the conclusion that they just don't like Medicaid, they being the federal government. And if you're going to be complicit on this and not speak up, this is a really important part. These are our dollars. They gave you a generalization of a fraud. They throw out numbers that now I see have been roundly discredited. And we can work on this together. The package I gave you, many of these are Republican ideas in that. So we hope that they would, the way we can fix this sooner is to ask the federal government to not do something that's never happened to any other state, that has no evidence behind it, is only going to hurt people, does nothing to improve fraud, and it's just a petty attack on Minnesota. Just ask them to stop that. But I would say this to Minnesotans, we continue to work hard. We have a high quality of life here. We're making sure that your work pays off for you. And I think the important thing is, I think it got lost last year in the tragedies of Melissa and Mark's murder. It got lost in the Annunciation shooting. It got lost in a lot of things that happened. That legislative session last year is a model on how things should be done. It's a model on how to be fiscally responsible and take care of the things we should do. And it's a model on how an absolutely evenly divided legislature put the needs of Minnesota first and let the politics take a back seat. And I would encourage, if we keep that same attitude, if we come with those great ideas coming from both sides, if we see the leadership that was exhibited last year collectively, we can get this. So thank you all. Looking forward to it.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Lisa Damas, Speaker of the House. Today's forecast gives us a chance to, as you've heard, pass a bipartisan tax conformity bill that would actually help workers through common sense policies, such as no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, as well as help our Main Street businesses continue to be the job creators that Minnesota so desperately needs. What I will tell you, though, is tax increases on Minnesota families and more government spending should be off the table. Our focus must remain on lowering costs on family budgets. As you heard the work of MMB, they said to offset any new spending needs to be offset with spending or reductions, savings. That's what we need to do here. We know that structural imbalance is still an issue, as you saw in the out years. We still have a spending problem. We need to rein that in. Our work, as you heard, last year helped very much, but there's still much more to do. So we're seeing yet again that Minnesotans are overtaxed, with another forecast that's showing we do have a higher tax revenue than expected. We're also seeing that conformity to program integrity Requirements set by the federal government is a necessary step to cut down on fraud and ensure that dollars are going to those that need it the most, as well as to ensure that we don't lose the federal dollars. We need to act. House Republicans stand ready in 3 ways. Federal tax conformity. We're also looking to take the pressure off of family budgets, and we want to stop fraud. Those are top priorities for Minnesotans across the state, and we look forward to the work that will be done this legislative session, this shortened year. I'm going to turn it over to Leader Harry Niska.
Thank you, Speaker Demuth. My name is Harry Niska, the Republican floor leader in the Minnesota House. This forecast really demonstrates that pro-growth economic policies and economic growth are the real solution to both our economy and also the fiscal situation that Minnesota has. One of the major drivers in the improved economic outlook is the national economic rebound driven by federal policy from Washington, D.C., pushed by Republicans. That's the real solution to the fiscal disaster we've seen in Minnesota from Minnesota Democrats. We need to reverse the policies that are holding our state economy back so we can fully participate in that national economic rebound. We saw this from what the Minnesota Chamber recently released. They did economic benchmarks looking at where we are at compared to the other states in our country in economic growth. Minnesota is falling behind in economic growth compared to other states, falling back to 33rd in GDP growth, 39th in job growth, and 46th in growth in median household income. Even if Minnesota were to improve its economic policy to where we were in the middle of the pack, we would actually be in that much better of an economic situation. So Minnesota needs to dramatically reduce its or dramatically improve its tax and regulatory environment, its economic competitiveness, so that we can keep up with the rest of the country. Unfortunately, Minnesota Democrats are too focused on fighting against the federal administration and fighting against those economic opportunities to allow us to fully participate in that economic rebound. The recent announcement from Senator Klobuchar that she's going to vote against new mining opportunities in northern Minnesota is a perfect illustration of the wrong direction that Minnesota Democrats are focused on. We should be trying to fully capture the economic rebound that's happening in the rest of the country here in Minnesota. This also demonstrates how we need to continue the fight on fraud. We saw today that health and human services costs started dropping as soon as the administration finally started checking for fraud in these programs. That's the bare minimum that the administration is doing right now. We have a robust plan we've been talking about for years and years and years, and we have the opportunity to cut down dramatically on the amount that the state pays out to fraudsters. It's good, I guess, that finally in the 8th year of this governor's administration, he's implemented some bare measures of fraud that have slowed down the avalanche of fraud that's been allowed under his administration. But imagine what we would have saved if he had taken Republicans seriously when he came into office instead of paying out billions of dollars to fraudsters over the years. Minnesota Republicans are going to continue to fight for program integrity, and considering the fact that, as the governor acknowledged, a big part of the Democrats' newly announced fraud plans are provisions that Republicans have been advocating for, fighting with Democrats for years and years. We expect that we're going to be able to make some really serious additional progress on stopping fraud, and that should improve our economic outlook going forward as well. So now I'll turn it over to Senate Leader Mark Johnson.
Well, good afternoon. And first of all, cheers to the national government right now and the policies that they're putting in place that are pro-business, making sure that our national government or our national economy is growing in a way that allows Minnesotans to reap the benefits from that. That's really what saved Minnesota's budget right now. Cheers to Minnesota Democrats that continue to focus on government needs. We got to make sure that we are focusing on the needs of Minnesotans for affordability. That means tax conformity. That means making sure that we're lowering things such as tab fees for vehicles. That means that we're focusing on things that affect things like property taxes. Look, we need to make sure that we're doing the things that focus on Minnesotans, putting them first throughout every policy that we do. And what we saw today was really a model of what Minnesotans should be focusing on, and that's how to grow this economy. We've got an opportunity here. We've got a lot of work in front of us. Democrats are still in a position right now where we're spending more than we're taking in. The only reason why we have money left on the bottom line is because our savings account still has money in it so we can write checks. That's going to run out soon. If we don't fix that, we're going to be in a heap of trouble. This session, we got to work together and making sure that we are focusing on Minnesotans and trimming down government spending in a way that helps out this state to make sure that it can grow and prosper in ways that we haven't seen for a long time. You saw the tone of the governor today. It really was a different tone that I haven't seen from him. I think trying to really cover up a lot of the work that we have in front of us, a lot of the wrong decisions that were made over the last two previous years under that trifecta. We have a lot of work in front of us, and we're going to be buckling down here now with the forecast out, that we're going to be doing that going forward and trying to figure out how to put Minnesotans first again, not state government. With that, I think most of the other points have been covered very well with House leadership. I think we're all open to take questions.
Can you talk about tax conformity? Ultimately, if, as I would understand it, if you conform to some of the no tip tax on tips and overtime, that would reduce revenues into the state at a time when there is that structural imbalance still. Are you concerned about that, and do you know how much it would hit the state budget to do that?
Yeah, the question is on tax conformity, how it would hit the state budget. And I want to clarify, as we heard from MMB, they said to offset any new spending with savings or spending reductions is what we need to do. So when we're looking at that tax conformity, the whole idea would be to make things more affordable for Minnesotans. As we have seen our costs rise and other things that make it harder here in our state, as we're talking property taxes and some of the other things that Minnesota families are facing, higher tab fees and all of those things that make it more expensive. The idea, and as you heard from the state economist talking about that K-shaped economy, you know, we're looking at that middle class or a little bit lower than middle class of how things hit them. No tax on tips specifically in the first fiscal year would be $126 million. No tax on overtime would be $265 million. That is a hefty amount when we're looking at where the budget is, but I want to remind you of where we were in 23 and 24 with excess taxes, excess spending. We had the $18 billion surplus, and what we didn't do for Minnesota families then is we didn't give them relief. We taxed them more. It is catching up with us. Right now, our state looks okay with the deficit down the road. We have to be smart, but we also have to make sure that job creators and job providers can do what they need to in the state to grow our economy and then still make things affordable for Minnesotans. Thanks for the question.
What about the uncertainty that comes from the federal government? The forecast cited immigration, trade, and tariffs as the greatest source of uncertainty, and that all comes from the federal government.
Yeah, as you heard earlier, too, that our state economist said slightly improved national economic outlook is what is driving higher revenue forecasts. So you heard that. National things are positively affecting us. Right now, the changes at the federal government, we have to make sure that we are doing everything to comply with those, such as the backgrounds that they need, and we need to make sure that there is the ability, if people are on SNAP, if there's work requirements, there are things we can do here at a state level that will help us avoid any cuts. But when we're looking at fraud, and it has gone on for years under the current administration, there needs to be a level of responsibility that when it wasn't taken at a state level, the feds are going to help us make sure that there is not more fraud going on.
Madam Speaker, would you support full tax conformity, and can you talk about some of the areas where you might look to cut to find those potentially billions of dollars?
So what we're going to be looking at, and I'm not saying right now that we need to do full tax conformity. Would I like to? Absolutely. I want to make things more affordable for Minnesotans. But our Ways and Means chairs, our tax chairs, our caucuses are going to be looking, and for every dollar that is either unspent or could come back, they're going to be doing that hard work together. We are still in a tie in the House. And as you heard the governor say how well we worked together last year, we have that opportunity, both Democrats and Republicans in the House, and then along with our Senate colleagues, to do the good work for Minnesotans. Whatever dollars we can find for savings, we will absolutely do that.
Your name, do you support the federal government withholding Medicaid dollars from Minnesota for fraud?
We know that we need to prevent fraud here in the state of Minnesota, and if it takes the feds putting on a little bit more pressure on Minnesota, I absolutely support preventing fraud here in the state so our tax dollars aren't stolen any longer.
This is preventing fraud, that withholding the money is preventing fraud?
I think it makes sure that the people that are going to be receiving dollars actually are legitimate people that are needing those dollars. Right now, we know that this is what is proposed. There are things in the courts. There are things that we don't even have the full details of yet.
Are you worried though about collateral damage to people who rely on the services who aren't committing fraud?
We know that we are taking care of people in Minnesota as they need to be. We have to look back. As you heard just a couple of days ago, there's going to be a look back process.
Governor, Speaker Stevens, sorry.
No problem.
Maybe a year. Donald Trump, during his State of the Union address, he said that Somali pirates are pillaging the state of Minnesota and that $19 billion of dollars they've taken from the state of Minnesota. Do you agree with the president that Somalis are been pillaging the state of Minnesota and committing fraud?
What I know here in the state of Minnesota is we have record fraud. Whoever has committed that record fraud, it has gone unchecked for years here in the state. We need better accountability within our programs. Obviously, you heard earlier that Governor Walz said, you know, the programs, just cutting programs maybe isn't what we should do yet. Governor Walz is the one that cut the housing stabilization services because it was riddled with fraud. Minnesota has a fraud problem that needs to end, and that is the focus that we're working on.
Leader Miska, you said a moment earlier that we need to reverse the policies that are holding our state economy back. What policies are you referencing there?
Sure. So in the trifecta, Democrats dramatically reduced the energy that we can produce in the state of Minnesota. They created this unrealistic, no carbon-free by 2040 policy that bans most of the forms of energy that Minnesotans rely on. There were massive increases in regulatory mandates on businesses throughout our state. We're one of the highest tax states in the country. I think the Chamber benchmark report does a pretty good job of laying out all of the ways in which Minnesota is one of the most difficult states in the country to invest in, to create jobs in, to start a business in, to grow a business in. We heard just a mention earlier from the state economist that Minnesota just this last year was one of the first years we've been positive in net migration within the state. The reality is economically productive Minnesotans are leaving the state of Minnesota because of the negative the negative business climate in the state of Minnesota. It's very, very difficult for Minnesota to compete in our 50-state economy with the regulatory and tax environment that Democrats have imposed on the state.
And you say that when the revenue of the state keeps growing beyond expectations. Every time we come here, we see a revenue number that is above what was previously forecast. So why does it matter if rich people are moving away?
Right. So the reason we have a higher revenue number, the top line reason that that's being driven is because of overall economic growth of the entire United States economy. That's a result of overall the positive economic benefits of federal policy driven by Republicans in Washington, D.C. Minnesota
grew slower last year than the previous 2 years. You know that, right?
Our nation's economy is doing better now, and the outlook for it is better now than it was the last time the SPGMI did.
Than the previous 2 years.
And Minnesota is lagging behind the rest of the national economy. Read the Chamber of Commerce benchmark report, and it lays it out pretty well. We used to be sort of middle of the pack in terms of all kinds of economic growth metrics, and we're falling down into the 30s and 40s on all these economic growth metrics. And that should be pretty concerning, I think, to Minnesotans as we think about the importance of economic growth to our fiscal health going forward.
The governor floated some IT upgrades as a possible spend this year. Is that something your caucus would support?
Not only is that something that our caucus would support, it's something that our caucus had to fight with Democrats last year in order to get the governor gave the example of the SSIS funding. The state has sort of neglected investment in this program, in the basic infrastructure that we expect counties to use to implement a lot of these social safety programs that we expect counties to administer. And Republicans had to fight tooth and nail with Democrats to get funding for that last year. I'm glad to hear that now the governor is acknowledging that that was really important that we did last year. But it is, if we're going to put burdens on our counties, we have to give them the tools that they need in order to be able to administer those programs.
Time for one more, guys.
What about the, Speaker Damath and Majority Leader both mentioned property taxes. What's the caucus plan for reducing property taxes?
Yeah, we're looking at everything on the table. Obviously, you know, what we were just talking about was a big driver in the property taxes. This last year, the state put more and more burdens on counties, and that's a lot of the big drivers. We're going to look at every solution we can to figure out how we, number one, reduce the burdens on cities and counties, school districts, paid family medical leave, ESST, a lot of the labor mandates that were put on by Democrats are a big driver in that. But in terms of, you know, looking at potential ways to offer direct relief for property taxes.
Specifics, or just, I mean, reducing the burdens on cities and counties is very broad.
Yeah, we're looking at all those solutions. Obviously, we have to work something out bipartisan fashion. Other than the specifics I just gave you, no. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Today's forecast has some good news for Minnesotans. Minnesotans, our workers and our businesses are growing a strong and stable economy. And effective budgeting by decision makers has saved $10 billion in the surplus and our reserve account. That is good news for Minnesota. Our stable economy and balanced budget are a reflection of Minnesotans' tradition of stewardship, good governance, and hard work. But what was a flashing light of caution is now a bright light with warning alarms signaling trouble coming from Republicans and Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. Huge cuts to health care and food programs, and shifting costs down to state and local governments and household budgets. Minnesotans are paying more, they're getting less. The increase in revenue in this forecast comes from the wealthiest few who had a great year in the stock market and they cashed out their gains. Good. Meanwhile, a growing number of Minnesotans are behind on credit cards, car notes, and student loans, and the gap between the rich and the rest of us is growing. The Trump Republican budget gives the wealthy another very significant tax cut, and it's paid for by the rest of us. Donald Trump's government and his retribution campaign is harming Minnesotans. He has done these things. He did this. He literally sent masked police who violated civil and constitutional rights. They abducted Minnesotans, and they killed a couple of Minnesotans in our streets. Donald Trump's actions are currently shrinking our workforce, destroying small businesses, and crushing family budgets, the costs of which are not yet evident in the forecast or in people's lives. His agencies are waging financial retribution on Minnesotans, defunding childcare, food programs that keep millions of kids and seniors fed, and health care that keeps hospitals and clinics open and staffed. Minnesotans are paying more in federal taxes than we get back in federal support. It's been that way for a long time, and we don't complain about that in Minnesota. No one needs to give us a medal. We're not Kash Patel. We're not asking for thanks for what we contribute, but we are demanding fairness. The DFL majorities have done everything we can to cut costs for Minnesotans. Billions of dollars in tax cuts for seniors on Social Security and working families. $1 billion for local governments to keep property taxes down. Free school meals for parents and kids, tuition-free college for young people, paid time off for workers. Trump and the Republican Congress are systemically wiping all of that out. Tariffs cost each household $1,700 last year, and Trump seems determined to increase that number in 2026. Housing costs are up through tariffs and labor shortages. Energy costs are on the rise because Republicans canceled clean power projects. There are cuts to and caps on student loans that are pushing college out of reach. Health insurance costs have doubled and tripled because Republicans in Congress didn't extend a tax credit. And hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans will lose health care and food support because of H.R. 1. Property taxes are spiking as new federal mandates burden our counties and leave Minnesotans with fewer services. The Republican affordability plans are an insult to people. They advise taking out a 50-year mortgage to buy a house. They want you to buy health insurance with a $30,000 deductible, or suggest buying fewer dollars for Christmas, or if you're lucky, include the president's sons in your grift scheme so he pardons you. Minnesotans are facing hard decisions because their costs are rising, but their wages are flat, and state leaders are going to face hard decisions this year and into the future, and those will be made infinitely harder because of the chaos and uncertainty created by Donald Trump's vengeful government and his compliant Republican Congress. Last year, we made hard compromises to balance the budget. We did it together. Hard choices resulted in the forecast that we are experiencing today. And I really do hope that we find that spirit again to do the work that Minnesotans sent us here to do. But we face an uncertain future. Most Minnesotans are working very hard, but they're falling behind, and we can't fail them. That's the work of our future. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is not a normal forecast day, in part because this forecast comes with the biggest asterisk ever. All of the improvement we saw in the forecast today, in fact, more than all of it, would be offset by just the cuts to Minnesota's Medicaid funding that were announced by the Trump administration earlier in the week if they persist throughout the biennium. And that's to say nothing of the other cuts that Trump has promised, and to say nothing of the impact of Operation Metro Surge, which wasn't felt in the forecast either. Unless Donald Trump's retaliatory campaign against Minnesota is stopped, these surpluses are actually deficits. The chaos and uncertainty Trump has caused will make it very challenging for legislators to make budget decisions going forward, and real Minnesotans will be worse off because of it. I was glad to see the improvement in the state's fiscal position, but it's important to note that that improvement is largely because the richest Minnesotans and the largest corporations are doing better. Regular Minnesotans are still feeling the pain. An ABC News poll that was released just this morning says that over half of Americans believe that health care, a new car, and a week-long vacation are unaffordable. The most striking slide that MMB presented today to me was the one that's showing the huge growth in what they called non-wage income. Non-wage income being a great euphemism for the type of income that rich people make. Capital gains, interest, dividends. You know who doesn't make a lot of non-wage income? Teachers, nurses, construction workers, regular people, not to mention people on Medicaid. All of the folks who are losing their health care because of Donald Trump, they don't make non-wage income. The House DFL will stand with those folks this session. In December, I stood here and talked about the consequences Minnesotans were seeing as a result of the Donald Trump presidency. Higher prices, higher health care costs, more and more giveaways going to billionaires and big corporations at the expense of the rest of us. Since then, Donald Trump has only accelerated his campaign of retribution, which is his word, not mine, against Minnesota. He sent thousands of federal agents here to terrorize our communities. His illegal and chaotic tariff policies continue to hurt families and small businesses, and he continues to be completely disconnected from the reality people are experiencing, as evidenced by the State of the Union earlier this week. And now the Trump administration is looking to cut $259 million per quarter, some $2 billion a biennium in Medicaid funding from Minnesota. They're not interested in solving the problems we're facing. They're only interested in retribution against a state that doesn't support Donald Trump. This is on top of the other funding threats that have come from the federal government. This retribution campaign is simply harming the most vulnerable Minnesotans. J.D. Vance's solution to the problems they're creating irresponsibly drain our budget reserve and leave our state in worse fiscal shape for the future. But in ordinary and extraordinary ways, Minnesotans have continued to stand up for their neighbors and their communities over the last few months. As legislators, it should be our job to have their back, to respond to the unconstitutional actions of the federal government, to address the fraud targeting programs meant to help some of the most vulnerable Minnesotans, and to help Minnesotans afford their lives. Instead, our Republican colleagues refused to stand up to Trump. I heard the Speaker of the House say that she supported Donald Trump's Medicaid cuts just a moment ago. I thought that was an incredible moment, that she supported his Medicaid cuts. They cheer him on as he attacked our state, and they continue to defend a broken status quo and a rigged system designed to work only for the rich and the powerful. The people of Minnesota deserve better than that. DFOs will continue to stand up for Minnesotans and will continue to work to build a future where hard work is actually rewarded, families have a real chance to get ahead, and communities can thrive. We're happy to take your questions.
So I'm hearing from both of you that you feel like it's hard with the volatility of will the money be cut, will it not be cut? They didn't even talk about some of the other pools of money that they've cut and then blocked by courts, ping pong match going on. How do you assess this when you go to the, do your work about any supplemental budget? Do you just have to say there's no room because we could be staring down these significant cuts?
I think that we, we're in the middle of a budget, first and foremost. And at least as we are thinking about it, we are keeping an eye on the things that need to happen, the urgent things that need to happen. If we do a bonding bill, which we plan to do, we'll have to pay for the debt service. We should pay for the security measures that have been put in place in the capital and the personnel costs. So there are some things that we need to spend on. But our caucus is very, very committed to being frugal, if you will, prudent, as we must, so that we are in a strong position going forward, and perhaps we can weather whatever comes from the Trump administration. And you're right that we can't predict it. He is unpredictable, and it is uncertain, and there could be billions of dollars worth of cuts. And Mark Johnson said cheers to the federal government. I would say cheers to that behavior of holding those things over the state's head and putting vulnerable Minnesotans at risk. So as we balance this budget, we're going to have to think about what kind of flexibility is going to be necessary for the administration if those cuts come in the summer, so we don't get called back in. But hopefully, the Republican members of the Congress that serve and represent the people of Minnesota will talk some sense into Donald Trump and make sure that the taxes that we pay into the federal government come back for us to be able to use for the people of Minnesota.
The Republicans' significant priorities is tax conformity with the federal tax cuts that were passed. Is that something that the DFL is open to?
Yeah, so the bill that passed the federal government this summer is massive, and it has huge impacts on all sectors of the economy and all sorts of people. And as we look at tax conformity, and we will take a very strong look at it, we're going to be assessing who are the winners and the losers in that federal bill. And then we're going to think about what should we do with our limited resources. Should we make those winners even better off, or should we help the losers in that bill? Because we do have limited resources, made even more limited by the actions of the federal government. So at some point, I think that we do need to have a really serious conversation about conformity, but we can't just cheer on the federal government. We have to be really thoughtful about how we approach conformity.
Follow up to that, no tax on overtime and tips that was mentioned, those generally would help more working class voters, and you're saying that that's who you want to support here. So is that something you're open to? Is there a way to even do it partially if it's too costly to the state's budget?
Well, I think it very much depends on how it's paid for. I mean, we do want to help the people who are struggling with affordability in Minnesota. You heard the numbers that the speaker articulated. I didn't really hear a thought about how that would be paid for. I'd like to know more about how we pay for it. We certainly, the DFL, could come up with a plan to pay for that, and we'd be happy to do that. Like I said, the wealthiest people and the richest corporations did very well in that federal tax bill. They did very well. And I don't think that they need to continue doing very well by the decisions we make in Minnesota's government.
Specific revenue-raising tax increase proposals that you're mulling right now, maybe?
With regard to the budget and taxes and tax conformity, I spent a lot of time this week with my colleague, Senator Rustin, her very sharp pencils and her very sharp mind. And she does have some things that she is considering. The Senate DFL did introduce last year a social media tax, which is a tax on data for those who are making a lot of money in the marketplace. So we'll see what she comes up with. But to the earlier question about conformity, I think just conforming with the federal government would be about $1 billion cost to the state's budget. And we have to think about what we're doing to propel Minnesotans forward.
Any other ballpark? I know North Star Policy Action said 100 million lost wages due to Metro surge. Any other ballpark sense of just the last 2 months? Workers staying home, businesses temporarily or permanently closing, any sense of what the impact really might be?
I don't know. I don't have a big dollar amount to share with you, and I don't know if Leader Murphy does. But I was just going to mention the city of Minneapolis came and visited with us yesterday and talked about the increased costs that they are bearing, which I think was at 80. Yeah.
So the only estimate that has been provided to me, at least, is the estimate from the city of Minneapolis on the impact and their economics in the city, and it's over $200 million. And that's just one city. So certainly the economic impact for the state is going to be tremendous, and as was mentioned, that isn't in the forecast right now.
Does this budget outlook make it difficult to do any sort of relief package for small businesses or renters or others who are affected by the surge?
Again, I think that we have to look at the urgent things we can do for the people of Minnesota while keeping our eye on the budgetary balance going forward. And I think most of us are thinking about either spending and reductions to balance out together because we want to make sure the future budget and that bottom line stays intact.
What sort of urgent things can you do?
For instance, Senator Port has been working over the course of the last couple of weeks on some assistance for people who have not been able to pay their rent, a very short-term, very targeted effort. That bill will be heard, I believe, next week in taxes. It's already been heard in the Minnesota House. That's a really good example. Senator Champion also working on a small business-oriented package. And when I was in Wilmer, not last Sunday, but the Sunday before, I was reminded by small business owners there that their businesses have struggled just like the ones in Minneapolis and St. Paul and the surrounding suburbs because of ICE and detentions and people not coming to work because they're fearful. This is a statewide issue. Even though some of my colleagues don't recognize it. And when we have had statewide crises in the past, we've come together to solve them for the people that have been impacted. And I think we need to take care of people in that same form this year.
What size bonding bill do you think you can afford now?
You know, House Democrats want as big of a bonding bill as we can get. There are tremendous infrastructure needs across the state of Minnesota. And when we talk about property taxes, this is one way that we can render assistance by helping cities and counties with infrastructure costs that they would otherwise bear themselves. It also creates jobs for working Minnesotans. So we are absolutely all in for a large bonding bill. And as you know, Senator Murphy said, you know, we are committed to paying for it and finding commensurate reductions or revenue sources that will pay for it. We're going to have, you know, a long discussion about the budget, and there's a lot of different ways to look at, but we want that. What we don't want is to be held hostage on the bonding bill, and we won't. If there's a price tag that isn't measured in dollars but in unrelated policy changes, we won't pay it.
Sounds like you're on board with the IT upgrades too that the governor mentioned.
Yeah, more than on board. And I was frankly pretty offended by the idea that they had to fight tooth and nail. It's ridiculous. Representative Jess Hansen led on trying to fund SSIS for years. And, you know, Chair Torkelson deserves great credit for the work he did last year on it. It was, as the governor said, a bipartisan effort, and it was just a complete distortion of the truth to say that they had to fight for it. You know, we rolled out an anti-fraud package last week, or earlier this week, excuse me, feels like last week. And it included making investments in IT because we do think that that's an important way that we can prevent fraud before it actually occurs, which should be the goal. It's great to have accountability, and we need accountability. The people who are responsible and the businesses that are responsible need to be held accountable for that fraud. But the goal should be to prevent fraud before it happens. And getting these systems into this century, getting them out of the Oregon Trail era and into the modern day is a great way to do that.
As you mentioned this week too, that the cost associated with the upgrades will be expensive, but an investment worth making. Do you think that the numbers you see today allow for such an investment that could be hundreds of millions of dollars potentially?
Yeah, I think potentially. I think that, again, as I agree with what Senator Murphy said, that as we're making spending decisions, we have to be looking at the long term and thinking about how we pay for things very carefully. And so we're going to have to find a way to pay for that. That's not just taking money off the bottom line. Do I think there's a way to do that? I do.
Thank you, everybody.